Los Angeles Rams, run it back. The Rams won the Super Bowl last year, and their main objective heading into the season is to give a repeat performance and win it for the second year in a row, being the first team to ever do so. The team did lose some key characters like Von Miller and Robert Woods, but in their place added pieces such as Bobby Wagner and Allen Robinson. Overall, with McVay, Stafford, Donald, and Kupp still leading the way, this team is still very strong, but running it back will not be easy with the league as stacked as it is. Arizona Cardinals, good after midseason. The time of Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray has been marred by a constant trend in Arizona over the past couple seasons, and that is midseason collapses. Last season was the perfect example of this, as they started out 7-0 and then went 4-6 over their last 10 before losing 34-11 in the wildcard round. Now I know that last season there were some injury problems with Murray, but despite that, this wasn't the first season that this has happened, and if they don't do something different, it won't be the last either. Add on top of that, DeAndre Hopkins' 6-game suspension, and there's a question of whether or not they'll even be in a position to collapse midseason. To be honest, only time will tell. Seattle Seahawks, life after Russ. The Seahawks traded their franchise quarterback and one of the most talented quarterbacks of all time, Russell Wilson, this offseason. So the question is, what will the team look like this year without Russ? To be honest, probably not very good. They have Drew Lock now, who I'm a fan of, but who hasn't proven to be a quality NFL QB yet. And until he does, their QB position and offense as a whole is a question mark. And I don't think their defense is enough to carry them, especially since they've lost their defensive anchor in Bobby Wagner. San Francisco 49ers, Lance for real? San Francisco 49ers were let down in big part by their QB play last year, especially in the fourth quarter of the NFC Championship game where Jimmy Garoppolo played absolutely terrible. So now the guy is Trey Lance for them, and the question is he for real? Because to be honest, we don't have a lot to go on. His intangibles and physical skills are almost unmatched by a lot of guys at the QB position, especially Jimmy Garoppolo. But also, he didn't do much in college, and we haven't seen anything from him at the NFL level. So the big question for them going forward is whether or not Trey Lance is really the guy for them. And if he is, will that put them over the hump? Only time will tell. Detroit Lions' future is bright. Now, the Lions have been terrible for a very long time, and I say this as a Lions fan who's been watching every season since 2014. The team has been struggling, and the only thing that was really keeping them afloat for years was Matthew Stafford. Once he was traded, the wheels were bound to completely fall off, and they did just that last season. That being said, the Lions had a really good draft where they added Jameson Williams and Aiden Hutchinson, amongst others, to the already great young talent they have, like TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift. The next hurdle in their improvement is finding a true QB1. Jared Goff is alright, but I don't think he'll be the long-term answer in Detroit. And once they do find their guy, likely through a future draft pick, I think they may finally be solid. Until then, though, they'll probably still be a bottom 6 or so team. Green Bay Packers, Rodgers to who? Now, the Green Bay Packers defense is still very good. In fact, I feel like their defense is underrated because their offense lost so much in the offseason. However, their offense losing so much in the offseason is still a story that needs to be talked about. And the main thing they lost was Devonta Adams. They also lost MVS, but they mostly lost Devonta Adams. That's a guy who's a top 2 wide receiver in the NFL, possibly top 1. So to lose him is a huge deal. And the biggest question for them really is, who is Rodgers going to throw to? They still have some decent talent like Robert Tonyan. They just drafted Christian Watson. There's still some guys there. And Rodgers just can make just about anyone look good. But even still, like the weapons they have now are nothing compared to Devonta Adams, MVS, and just who they had in the past. So it's going to be a big question mark to see how good their passing game is. And if the passing game is lacking somehow, can the running game make up for it? Minnesota Vikings, over the hump. The Vikings have been in a weird sort of limbo over the past couple of seasons. Never quite terrible, but never good enough to be real contenders. Some people blame Kirk Cousins for this, though I believe that's unfair. He does struggle a bit in big games, and I wouldn't label him as particularly clutch, but he's been a steady hand in that position, and his stats have been among the best since he joined the team. Now, I know stats don't tell the whole story, but he's still not as bad as people make him out to be. And I think the bigger problem for the Vikings was that their defense was ranked 24th in total last season, and that the coaching was inconsistent at best. The question for them is that, can they fix these issues and get over the hump? Probably not, but I think they could still sneak into the playoffs in a not-so-strong division. Chicago Bears, is Fields him? I'm going to keep it frank. The Bears have a lot of issues to address and questions to answer, but to me I think the biggest one is the one that has been persistent for the Bears over the years. Is their QB good enough? The guy for this era is Justin Fields. The first round pick was mostly mediocre last year, but did show some flashes. And I know that Bears fans everywhere are hoping that Fields can be the one QB to be great for their team, something they've never really had. I'm not sure I'm a believer, but he definitely has potential. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Brady is back. Now, after their divisional round loss to the Rams, there was a time during this offseason where Tom Brady finally announced his retirement, to the rejoicement of much of the NFL world. When this was the case, there was a big question on who could possibly replace the GOAT at quarterback, and the likely answer was second-year player Kyle Trask out of Florida. However, Tom Brady then said, just kidding, and now Tampa doesn't have to worry about the quarterback position for at least one more season. They did, however, lose their coach for real, as Bruce Arians retired, and now Todd Bowles will get his second chance at head coaching again. It'll be interesting to see how this works out, and if the Bucs can reach the Super Bowl again, or if they'll come short in the playoffs for the second year in a row. And if they do, what happens with Brady after that? Carolina Panthers, is Baker back? The Panthers recently announced that the newly acquired Baker Mayfield will start for them at quarterback. This is interesting to me because, in my opinion, Baker has faced so much criticism over the years that he's become underrated, And even though the Panthers aren't stacked, it'll be fascinating to see if he can play at a high level again and make a connection with a hopefully healthy Christian McCaffrey to make an offensive duo that may be able to put some points on the board. Atlanta Falcons, room to improve. The Falcons are in a complete state of disarray, especially after trading away their former MVP and franchise quarterback Matt Ryan to the Colts and losing one of their best wide receivers, Calvin Ridley, to a 1-year gambling suspension. Overall, the Falcons do have some good pieces, such as Kyle Pitts, Cordell Patterson, and AJ Terrell, but I don't think they're going to be able to put all those pieces together quite yet. However, if Desmond Ritter develops like they hope and they continue to add solid young players, they may be competitive sooner rather than later, just not this season. New Orleans Saints, overall, really solid. The Saints are a good team. They have great defensive anchors in Cam Jordan and Marshawn Lattimore, a nice young rookie in Drake London at receiver, established offensive stars in Kamara and Thomas if they play, and a returning Jameis Winston who looked great last year before his injury. I honestly think this is a playoff team who may make a deep run into the postseason. Washington Commanders, will Wentz win? Carson Wentz was, in my opinion, unfairly scapegoated for the Colts missing the playoffs last season. Now, don't get me wrong, he played very poorly in that last game against the Jaguars, but on the season as a whole, he played quite well and was very efficient, especially compared to his last campaign in Philly, where he threw twice as many picks and almost half as many touchdowns. Now, I know that in Indy he had Jonathan Taylor, which was a big help, but even so, I think he's been slightly disrespected. Now, is Wentz Washington's long-term answer at quarterback? I'm not so sure, but I do think he will play well this season, and in the meantime, Sam Howell, who I think could be an all-time great draft steal, waits in the wings. New York Giants, still gonna suck. I don't want to sugarcoat it, so I won't. The Giants have been a relative disaster over the last couple seasons, and there aren't any major signs of improvement heading into 2022. Daniel Jones still isn't proven, Saquon's health and productivity are a huge question mark. Their defense was towards the bottom of the league last season, and likely still will be this season. Their only positive is the players they've added through the draft. Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal will both be future studs, but probably won't be full game changers in their rookie years. However, even if they are, the Giants still won't win more than 5 games. Dallas Cowboys, definition of insanity. So, if you've ever played Far Cry, you know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And to me, that's kind of what the Dallas Cowboys are doing this season. They're an interesting team because I do think they're good, especially on paper, but their team just hasn't changed much from last year. They didn't do much through the draft, they didn't do much through free agency, and despite being a good team, I don't think they're good enough to really be a contender. I don't think they made the changes needed to be a contender. So I think while they're still a playoff team, I don't see them advancing further than they did last year. Maybe like by one game, but certainly not the Super Bowl. Philadelphia Eagles, hurts to heal. The words might be a bit of a reach, but to me, this year is basically the make or break year for Jalen Hurts. He's been extremely okay in his first 2 years in the league and did enough to sneak into the playoffs this past year before being crushed by Tom Brady. That being said, a lot of fans still aren't convinced with him as a guy going forward, and this will have to be the season where Hurts finally breaks out and proves himself as the true QB1 before the brutal Philly sports market turns on him.